What is going on, everybody? Welcome to week one. It feels like the longest offseason of all time, but we are here ready to start talking about some game stacks on episode one of the Underworld Stackfest. That's a fun, very fun name. I like
who came
this
up with
name.
it? Who? Anyone remember who came up with that name?
Yeah, I bet we can guess. I'm excited. I am your host, Erik Beimfohr. We are having a very fun new show here, and I'm joined by Dario, Offstein, and of course, Matt Kelley, the Podfather. And we're going to every single week walk you through some of the best game stacks, and obviously a lot more even than just game stacks to help your DFS lineups set for the entire week. Before we hop in, Dario, how's everything going? How are you feeling? A few hours away from week one kickoff. Are you ready? Are you not ready? What are we feeling?
It's pretty surreal. I think it's hard to say I feel completely ready, but I'm excited. It's going to be, I've got a team with Allen double stacked in a player profiler championship league. So hoping to start seeing those points pour in, and yeah, I can't wait.
Matt, what about you?
Well, Dario's been waiting for this his whole life, and this is a big deal for Dario. Dario just graduated college. He was an intern like a half a minute ago. Next thing you know, he's director of analytics, and he's in charge of all our rankings, our projections, our DFS tool set. And so he's never actually been in this captain chair, right, when week one kicks off. So, dude, this is a big moment, buddy. This is it. It's Thursday. Yeah. It's happening.
It is. You're also significantly more advanced for your age than I was. I certainly wasn't the director of analytics for anything when I had just graduated college. Maybe like of beers at the bar or something like that. That was about where I was. So I'm excited to get to talk to you guys. We're about to hop into some of these games. One thing I did just want to hit on, since it's week one, right? It's a brand new season. We'll start with you, Matt, since we started with Dario. Is there any kind of like overarching theme or anything that you're like kind of feeling heading into the season before we hop into some of the specific games?
Well, just remember that we don't know what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Week one is the hardest week because we're not in. We think we know. Like with a bunch of these teams, what's interesting is there's been like a consensus that has hardened around what we believe will be the usage patterns for a lot of these teams, what we believe to be some of these new coaches with their strategies, their philosophies, and how they're going to approach things. But if anyone really thinks they know what the touch distribution is going to be in Las Vegas, like that's one of the big open questions right now. Does Josh McDaniel respect Josh Jacobs? Like Josh versus Josh? I don't know. We have no idea, right? We hope, right? But no one's allowed to be surprised when it's Amir Abdullah hogging the fantasy points in week one. And I know that a lot of people are going to walk over and wander over and be like, this is crazy. Amir Abdullah, really? Wow, it's a flashback. What is this, 2017? What's going on? And it's like, no, man, you've been paying attention to preseason. You've been paying attention to the undercurrents of what these coaches are talking about, the usage patterns in preseason, and even going back to last year with the role that Amir Abdullah had. You're not allowed to be surprised, but do we know? No. So this is a very interesting week where we're going to be maybe zigging when the consensus is zagging on some of these usage patterns, with the acknowledgement that, this is very open-ended, especially with all these teams with new coaching staffs.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, you use the Raiders are one of the best examples, but this year, maybe more than ever, there's like, a third of the league, half the league, so a very large percentage where we, even the Chiefs have been a team that we have been able to pretty much just, you write off DeMarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle and even Hardman, and you focus in on a couple of guys.
Right.
The Packers with Devontae Adams, right? Even the Seahawks, who stink now, but they had Russell Wilson. It was two guys. Now half the league is blown up. And what the example of what you said with the Raiders is applicable to so many situations. So I think it's a really fun time.
Dude. Like, how many routes is Josh Palmer going to run?
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see.
Gerald Everett is another one that at first he wasn't getting hype, and now he's getting hype. And so there's all of these situations that we just don't really know. Dario, how are you feeling about all that?
Yeah, I think that one of the big narratives has been like the AFC West arms race, and I'm really excited to see that starting to play out. Like, I mean, this week we get Chargers hosting the Raiders, which is basically a home game for the Raiders if you know anything about Chargers fans, and LA. But just seeing that happen and play out in real time, and how many of these shootouts will actually happen, like we are sort of projecting, is going to be very interesting. And then again, the Broncos are another team where the touch distribution between Javonte and Melvin Gordon, as well as the target distribution, is totally up in the air. So it'll be really interesting to see just how that entire division plays out. I mean, you already hit on the Chiefs and the Raiders.
And speaking of the Chiefs, we're gonna hop into that game first. This is my, I guess I would call it, favorite game, but for a lot of different reasons, both because of some potential expected fireworks and because a lot of what we just touched on, really on both sides too. The Chiefs and the Cardinals actually play in the afternoon time slot, but Patrick Mahomes now in his first season without Tyreek Hill, as we've talked about in terms of target distribution and touch distribution in the backfield for the Chiefs, is pretty uncertain. The Cardinals bring in Marquise Hollywood Brown in the offseason. We just literally this morning got reports that Zach Ertz didn't practice today. Christian Kirk is gone. And so what does that mean for Rondale Moore? DeAndre Hopkins is suspended. This game has a lot of potential fireworks on both sides, but also a lot of uncertainty. Matt, how are you? This is our first game, but it's pretty fun, but also pretty tough to pin down.
All right, so let's go through the cornerbacks on Arizona, right? Byron
Yes.
Murphy, Marco Wilson, Breon Borders, Christian Matthew, Josh Jackson, newly signed. This is not a good secondary, right? This is not a good secondary. They can't just get by with Budda Baker, right? They're gonna try to smoke and mirrors it, but this is a very exploitable secondary. So I think that's what I'm hoping that we see is maybe some deep shots to take advantage of the mismatches. So deep shots to I mean, it's so gross, but I really don't think that this is a Sky Moore week. I think we're a few weeks away from Sky Moore being fully unlocked. In their base packages throughout camp, it was MVS, it was Hardman, and it was Juju. And I think taking shots on MVS and Miko Hardman could be a gross way to get that upside for value.
I will. I'm glad you said that, because I will tease for the RG premium subscribers. I've already got my conviction play, or whatever we call them in Lineup HQ. We all have to go through and tag kind of our favorite plays of the week, and MVS is actually one of them for me, because basically of everything that you outlined, I've been like foaming at the mouth for this week 1 matchup for the Chiefs all year. You outlined the secondary. I don't need to piggyback on it at all, but that's been one of my big takeaways.
We didn't talk, by the way. I'm in Vegas at the FFWC, where I'm buying. By the way, Marquise Brown went for a shockingly high dollar amount in a super high stakes auction. Okay, so I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. But these guys are reacting to the Ertz news and all this stuff in real time, and they're like bidding up Marquise Brown. That's just what the high stakes are doing. I'm reporting that to you now. I just sat down. I woke up. I sat down in this chair. I turned the camera on, and we're talking. Eric and I did not plan this out. I just, basically I was Dwayne Wade throwing it up to you with the MVS, but it's like we didn't even practice. I had no idea you were going to say that.
But can you also imagine the scenario in which MVS catches the 70-yard touchdown, and then on the flip side, the Cardinals are chasing, and Hollywood catches the 70-yard touchdown or whatever on the other side? It's like, this is a game stacks show. And Dario, doesn't this game just like scream of what you want in a game stack?
Oh, absolutely. And we have 2 elite quarterbacks. None of the other games we're going to talk about today are games where we think stacking either quarterback is a really good option. But in this game, I mean, you can stack Kyler with, like you said, Hollywood Brown. Rondale Moore, I think he's been questionable this week in practice. So if Rondale Moore goes, he's probably going to be pretty chalky, but another option to stack Kyler with. And then all these guys are
Hold on, Dario. Eric, you prefer MVS this week to Rondale Moore?
Yes, I do.
I agree, 100%. I think most people are going to go the other direction, though.
I think so
Yeah,
too.
no,
And
Rondale
our
Moore's
ownership
projected
projections.
ownership is
Mhm.
pretty high on both sides, but I think that MVS is definitely a better play.
I think. What do you
We're
guys?
starting strong here. We're starting
Yeah.
strong. We're already contrarian.
I wanted to
Contrarian
touch on.
upside.
Yes.
That's what the Stackfest is. We're in real time defining sort of the mission of the show. Right.
Right. We're figuring this out. Yeah, we're
We're figuring this
out.
out on the fly. We just turned the cameras on. We just turned the mics on. We haven't talked before. No show prep. This is the theme right here.
What are you guys thinking about though on the Cardinal side, with Rondale banged up, with maybe Zach Ertz banged up? How are you? You know, we kind of just we glossed over a couple of the Chiefs guys, which maybe we'll come back to in a second. But how are you kind of process? Is it like kind of Hollywood or bust? Are you into Trey McBride if Zach Ertz doesn't go? Are you? I think Rondale's ownership is a little bit crazy. Do you think, you mentioned some of the preseason usage patterns? They've also shown a little bit in 4 wide sets and 10 personnel, playing Hollywood in the slot as well. And so I just kind of, how are you processing the Cardinals side of things? Because, you know, if MVS catches two long touchdowns, it sets up the Cardinals pretty well too. But I think they're a little bit difficult to dissect, I guess, outside of Hollywood.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I mean, especially if Ertz misses, I think that there's a chance we see Max Williams get some run ahead of Trey McBride. Like, you don't always see rookie tight ends just rolling out there in week 1 and getting a full snap share. And then AJ Green is kind of like, again, a pretty disgusting play, but I think if Ertz or Rondale, especially if both of them are out, like, he's going to get his targets and the Cardinals are going to be chasing the Chiefs. So you probably want to be filling him into some of your lineups.
Yeah, in terms of punt play tight ends, I don't think McBride or Max Williams are the move this week. I mean, there's others like Dan Bellinger is 2.5K on DraftKings. Dan Bellinger also went more than $1 in this high stakes auction. I was like, oh, what's up? The people, people are on Bellinger. Like he's the min right now. That's probably a better play. Max Williams has always been a blocking tight end, so they're probably going to split the work. If it's more, probably 60-40 Williams, and that's just not usable, right? I think that AJ Green is going to be a guy that you can play. It's true. He's on a football team, right? They're paying him money. He's putting the pads on. He's putting the helmet on. He's going to be running routes. We're going to look up. He's going to get 10 targets. And we're just going to be like, yeah, I guess it happened. That's fine. I mean, good.
It's like the first couple of weeks of, what was it, 2 years ago with the Bengals when AJ Green was racking up all those targets, and those might have been the most useless targets I can remember.
Targets of all time. I remember that.
But what this is telling me, I think, what I'm kind of digesting from you guys is, I mean, all roads kind of point to Hollywood on the Cardinal side. I guess one thing I would say is, what do you think about a James Conner type of thing, where we saw if this all plays out kind of like we're talking about, and I don't really foresee a way the Cardinals can stop the Chiefs. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of my depiction of the game. Is James Conner, we saw the upside last year without Chase Edmonds. They do obviously have a couple of backups this year. Maybe they feel a little more comfortable playing. But if they're chasing points and he's catching a bunch of checkdowns, in the second half, and he's the goal line back, does he have any, maybe as a bring back or in a game stack to you? Are you interested in Conner at all?
Yeah. Yes, Dario, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's, we saw how many passes he caught last year from Kyler, and now Chase Edmonds is out of the picture. I think that's another snapshot that we'll be interested in seeing. Like, is Benjamin gonna cut into that workload, and how much? But I mean, what we know about James Conner right now is that he does have a pretty solid ceiling when catching passes, and we expect the Cardinals to be playing from behind. So that's absolutely in play.
I mean,
anything else, Matt?
Yeah, well, a theme that we're going to keep coming back to is that we have a lot of data at playerprofiler.com on cornerbacks, on cornerback wide receiver matchups, and on offensive line. So this is going to be a show that you can continue to tune in to for, analysis that goes a bit beyond the actual players on the slate and talks about the game environment within the context of the two offensive lines, the pressure that these quarterbacks are going to be under, what the secondaries look like. And, the Chiefs lost a key corner in Ward, right? Was it Charvarius Ward? So
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, so they lost Charvarius Ward, who was a starting corner. He was a top 30 corner on our cornerback rankings. We have cornerback rankings on playerprofiler.com. And yes, they have L'Jarius Sneed, and he's like a top 20 corner in the league. He's good, but they're going to move Hollywood around the formation. He might get stuck on AJ Green out at X. So if Sneed gets stuck on AJ Green out at X, is very possible. Then we're talking about Trent McDuffie. We're talking about Rashad Fenton, Joshua Williams. These secondaries are both worse. So this is why we're leading off with this game. I almost feel like we should have kept it to the end because it's such a great game to talk about. But these are the sort of the ancillary dynamics around this game, which make it even better. That it's two stud quarterbacks facing off against each other with degraded secondaries. That's where it's, oh yes, that's the game. Yes, that's why.
And I mean, we've heard it all off
Dario.
season, but Kyler, most accurate deep ball passer in the league, and Hollywood Brown, probably one of the best deep threats in the league. So it'll be really exciting to see that pairing. They're reunited from their college days at Oklahoma, as we all know. And I think that, seeing that pairing for the first time in real game action is going to be very exciting. And yeah, there's probably, if you had to make me bet on whether they will connect for a pass of over 20 yards, I think we're all agreeing that they probably will at some point in this game, right?
Yep.
So who are we more likely to play, Mahomes or Murray?
What do you think, Dario?
I think I'm probably looking at a pretty even split, slightly leaning toward Mahomes, just because he has a couple more options to stack with. Sprinkle in some Mahomes, Kelsey, Juju lineups, some Mahomes, Kelsey, MVS lineups, some Mahomes, Juju, MVS lineups. And then with Kyler, you really just have like Hollywood to stack him with directly, and then you pick your chief on the bring back. So I think that because of that dynamic where there's more appealing weapons on the Chiefs this week, you probably end up with a little bit more Mahomes in your lineups.
It's so consolidated, though. Can't we get away with Murray Connor this week? Isn't this one of those rare cases where he's probably going to catch enough passes there's so few other options that you really get excited about that you could play it and not really worried about negative correlation, more leaning into the game stack?
Yeah, I think you definitely could. I mean, I remember Josh did an episode of First Mover about this particular research last year where like quarterback and running back one ceilings are actually, not as negatively correlated as people perceive. Like as far as hitting their 95th percentile outcome, when that happens with the quarterback, it increases the probability of the running back having that happen as well. So I think that you should be open to stacking a little bit of Connor with your Kyler Murray stacks.
I think that makes a ton of sense. We've obviously talked about this game a lot, but I do just want to hit on a couple of the guys who are maybe even some of the biggest names in the whole game that we haven't talked about. Travis Kelce, now without Tyreek Hill, getting a little older. We all have probably heard some of the offseason concerns and such about Kelce. Didn't play. There was a funny narrative going around about how he didn't play every single offensive snap with the first team in the preseason, which I thought was humorous. But to the point about trends, it's at least something that's minorly notable. And then Juju Smith-Schuster, who everyone has anointed the number one passing game option outside of Travis Kelce on the Chiefs. And then you mentioned Sky Moore. It's probably not quite Sky Moore time. I'm sure there will be a show down the road when we're talking plenty about Sky Moore here, but probably not quite him. But then does that mean McCole Hardman needs to be mixed into your lineups if you're like mass multi-entering? Matt, what are we doing with those other guys on the Chiefs side?
I mean, do we really need to talk about Kelce at this point?
Yeah, probably
There's no Tyreek Hill. Okay, so you're playing Kelce at will with confidence. Clearly, there's no Hill, by the way. So Hill's no longer a Chief. So that's amazing, right? Kelce's amazing.
Yeah,
but yeah, we're mixing in Hardman. I would say Hardman at maybe 1/3 the exposure of MVS, if not a little more.
That makes sense.
Is that right, Dario?
That feels pretty good.
Yeah.
And we have, just for reference, we have both MVS and McCole Hardman around 2 to 3% ownership on this slate. So I think both make a ton of sense. Yeah.
Really? That's going to change.
I would
After
think
the
so.
show comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if we don't shut up, then it's definitely going to change. Dario, what do you think about what about Juju?
Yeah, I think Juju, I mean, there was that preseason knee injury that kept him out for a couple weeks. I think that made us all a little nervous, but sounds like he's fully cleared to go. And, he's probably going to see a good amount of, I think we have him projected for about a 18, 19, 20% target share. And in a game where we expect the Chiefs to drop back and pass the ball, I think, we will see his targets. But I think, like we said, this is week one. We really don't know as much as we think we do. And, you could see a dud game from him, but I think we also could see him end up with 9 or 10 targets and really exceed what we're projecting. So I think you just have to be aware of that range of outcomes and definitely want to squeeze him into those stacks.
We're also sprinkling in McKinnon. Okay. For sure. So one thing I want to be clear on in this game, much more into McKinnon than Benjamin. And just like it's not Sky Moore time, it's also not Pacheco time. I love Pacheco. I am Pacheco. Okay. Player Profiler exists to surface players like Isaiah Pacheco. Okay. We get it. But we also are, seasoned DFS players with a whole DFS module. And, that is powered by people like Dario and, sophisticated computer systems. And that ain't it. Sky Moore ain't it. Pacheco ain't it week one. If there is a running back that I'm going to play that's not James Conner in this game, it's going to be Jerick McKinnon. Because there's a very real chance that the Chiefs go down. One thing I'm excited about this year, which I don't think I've heard that many people talk about, is the possibility of comeback Mahomes. The Chiefs are going to be in more comeback situations this year. They're not the same team they were last year. They've lost pieces. They've backfilled it from the draft, and that's great, but those players take time to develop. The schedule is an absolute murderer's row. So they have a first-place schedule, plus they're in the AFC West. You put those things together, it's absolutely brutal, their schedule. So throughout the season, it's going to be interesting to see Mahomes down 10, what happens? And that, to me, screams, oh, look at Jerick McKinnon. Look at the value on Jerick McKinnon. And I think that he's not just going to be a hurry-up back. I think he's going to be in there in some breather back role, especially in week one, when they're just kind of dabbling with Pacheco here and there. I think Pacheco might get in for a drive or two. They might sprinkle him in a little bit. But I think that McKinnon's going to be more than just a third down back, especially early in the season before Pacheco really gets rolling. So now is the time to play him.
I also think the McKinnon thing is very interesting, particularly, again, the show being a game stack theme. If it does start to kind of shoot out, like you said, if the Cardinals, get out by 2 scores early, McKinnon was playing all the passing down snaps in the preseason. And like you said, if you get comeback Mahomes, and they clearly trust McKinnon from the stretch run and the playoff run of last year, there isn't really a lot of running back value on this slate. We don't have the times when, the Cam Makers and Travis Etienne's and such of the world got hurt. And the pricing was already out. No one has really gotten hurt. If anything, people have gotten healthier. And so McKinnon is probably, to me, one of the better value options. Again, probably a little bit more so in this game stack element, but I do think he makes sense, because there are scenarios where he catches 7-8 balls or something, and then all you got to do is find the paint and you get an absolute smash for him.
Yeah, he and Abdullah are like sprinkle satellite backs for
because when a game script goes. When the game script goes that guy's way, they score 20 plus fantasy points. Right. It's just, what percentage of the time does it go that way? Not a lot. That's why you only sprinkle them in, right? So we did talk a little bit about the AFC West. So here is one of those AFC West shootouts at the next game, kind of on our board. You also mentioned, Matt, you mentioned offensive line play, and I find this game to be kind of fascinating on opposite ends of the spectrum on both sides of the offensive line here, going in opposite directions. We're excited about both of these teams, but I think there's a lot of really fun variables. You mentioned Josh Palmer, We have Sony Michel signing with the Chargers. You talked about Josh Jacobs on the Raiders side, and they obviously have Devontae Adams, and Darren Waller is apparently fine, and he was holding in. He was pulling in Deontay Johnson, Hunter Renfrow, all sorts of uncertainty going on around both the Chargers and the Raiders. But the only thing that's not uncertain is that we expect at least a decent amount of fireworks. Dario, we'll start with you. How are you feeling at a high level about Chargers Raiders?
Yeah, I think that this is an absolutely sneaky game because it's got the second highest over/under on the slate with 52.
How is it
Chargers are only
sneaky if
favored.
it has the second highest over/under?
Well, it's sneaky because the projected ownership on Herbert is like 6th among the quarterbacks, and the projected ownership for Mike Williams is like way down there. He's 7% on DraftKings, only 13% on FanDuel. Is decent, but I mean, you can get a relatively unique Herbert Mike Williams stack. You're paying up for the cost, but this game could go absolutely nuclear. So, I mean, it's sneaky in that people are focusing so hard on the Chiefs Cardinals games that they're forgetting that Justin Herbert is basically the best quarterback the NFL has ever seen through the first 2 seasons of his career. And this game is projecting to be fast, and we know that the Chargers love to chuck the ball. So that's how it's sneaky, Matt.
So I love this game. Okay. I love AFC West shootouts. I love it. Okay. But when I think about the dynamics of these two squads, Eric alluded to it. The reason why I prefer the Cardinals Chiefs game is because there is a possibility, because I don't think it's like the probability that Cardinals Chiefs doesn't shoot out is very low for all the reasons we laid out, from quarterback play to offensive line play to the secondaries, right? The problem is you have a pretty wicked mismatch on one side of the football, which could drag the game down in a way that I don't think that other game can be dragged down. In that the Chargers defensive line and edge rushers are just, as Austin Eckler said on our podcast, just stocked with werewolves. Okay. And the Raiders offensive line is Andre James, Jermaine Elumoner, John Simpson, Colton Miller, Lester Cotton. It's shaping up to be a bottom 5 offensive line in the league, and it's their own fault. They drafted Henry Ruggs over Tristan Wirfs. So go back to the tape at the NFL draft with Roger Goodell, and that's where you screwed it up. Okay. So, but now they're in this pretty awful situation with their offensive line with the worst possible matchup. Okay. Going against Bosa and co. I don't love it. I think that there's a danger that these drives stall out, that Carr's facing a lot of, 3rd and 20s, and that the game doesn't shoot out at the level we want it to because that side of it is dragged down, and then Herbert's sort of less incentivized to air it out. We see more Eckler, for example. So that is the risk. I still think that there's a higher probability that it shoots out than not, but that's just the only temperament that I want to throw out there.
I was going to say, Dario, what do you think about this concept that Matt basically alluded to that I've been feeling a little bit as well? The Chargers have also gotten better on defense. I don't want to say this was the reason why they were so aggressive last year and had so many kind of shootouts, but I think it's at least a variable to the effect that Brandon Staley is a very sharp guy. Why is he going for it on 4th down in his own territory when other people are not willing to do it? It's because he knows his defense can't stop anyone. If his defense is a little bit better and they have this massive mismatch in the trenches, which is, arguably the most important part of football, is there now they got Sony Michel.
It's arguably also the biggest mismatch in week 1.
Yeah.
Is
right.
The Raiders offensive line versus the Chargers pass rush.
Right there with
San
Francisco
how is Josh
and
Jacobs
Chicago,
going to get a yard is my question.
Right.
Well,
JC
Zamir
Jackson,
White's going to.
JC Jackson is questionable this week, and he's supposed to be a game time decision. And if JC Jackson is out, I think you have to play some Devontae Adams.
JC Jackson's not playing. I can break some news right now. JC Jackson's not playing. Zach Ertz is not playing. I don't think either of those guys are playing. Okay. I think Zach Ertz gave it a go, right? And then his body didn't react well. That's what happens. These guys give it a go, and their body doesn't. They see how their body reacts, and then that pretty much will tell you what you need to know. I think J.C. Jackson's an even bigger long shot than Zach Ertz to play. That is going to be the saving grace of the shootout, fellas, is that Derek Carr has enough mobility and he has enough rapport with Davante Adams, one of the best wide receivers in the league, number one the last 5 years in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, receptions. He's pretty good, guys. He's pretty good. And Hunter Renfro's underrated, and now Waller's paid, and he's back from his hold in where he had. I think he missed some practice with it was a sore wallet, wasn't it? Was it a sore wallet?
Yeah, his wallet was hurting his hamstring.
Yeah, it's a sore wallet. So I think that's what. So now he's solved his wallet injury. Has Waller's wallet. That's the name of the show. Waller's wallet. Totally healed. The wallet's healed. So that's the thing. There's enough weapons, and you can see that if he has to scramble inside the pocket and get extra time, there's going to be someone coming open, and that might just be enough to sustain these drives and to get us into over that 50-point threshold that we're looking for.
Dario, who do you think on that Raiders side, though? How do we pick between? I mean, Davante Adams is the clear standout, but Darren Waller, now having someone like Davante Adams to maybe draw a little bit of coverage, is he the guy? His matchup is not ideal. How are you kind of assessing the Raiders, though?
Yeah, I think that, Davante Adams is obviously, like you said, the elite option. Darren Waller, I think, is probably the best, one of the best options at tight end, right? We know that tight end is just so hard to find anyone at all. So, it depends on just the lineup that you're constructing, whether you feel like spending slightly up at tight end and getting that Waller. And then I think that Renfro, I mean, he's, kind of the murkiest of the bunch. It's unclear just how much of his target share that he saw last season is going to continue into this season now that Davante Adams is in town. So I think that he's sort of, the lowest floor play for sure, but we know that he already has that rapport with Carr. So I think if you're asking me, I'm probably going to end up with the most Waller just because Davante Adams' cost is pretty prohibitive, and then Adams, and then Renfro, if I had to guess the order they'll end up in most of my lineups.
And then Matt, do you kind of agree with that general assessment? And then can you go to the other side? They're maybe even more difficult because we have a running back, and maybe you like Josh Jacobs, and I don't want to speak for you, but you have a running back in Austin Eckler who you've outlined a very clear path to where he could be the one getting all the work for the Chargers, and then 4 potential passing game options: Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, and Gerald Everett. How are you kind of assessing that?
Again, let's check out the Raiders secondary. This is why we love the Raiders, by the way. Even if Carr is under constant duress, they're gonna have to score a ton of points to make up for the lost Casey Hayward, right? So they have Rock Ya-Sin at cornerback. They have Nate Hobbs, Anthony Everett, Amik Robertson. Have you heard of these guys? Right? It's really
old
bad.
Is Rock Ya-Sin now? Oh, only 26. It feels like he's older, but maybe it's just because his name is so notable. You remember him.
I mean, Mike Williams is going to feast. I mean, eventually he'll get banged up and his performance will be sapped, but this is why, right? This is why we have Mike Williams in seasonal leagues. This is why we have Mike Williams in best ball. We circled on the schedule spike week. Do you know anything about spike weeks, Eric?
A little.
You know anything about spike weeks? This is it. This is the ball game. This is AFC West against Rock Ya-Sin. You freaking circle that one on the week 1. He's fully healthy. This is it.
So Dario, Matt likes Mike Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I like Mike Williams over everybody.
Would you?
I think we should have more exposure to Mike Williams than any other Charger this week. Do you agree with that?
Yeah,
Dario?
I totally do. We had Mike Williams ranked ahead of Keenan Allen in seasonal leagues just because we care that much about ceiling, and we care that much about the fact that he is, still in his prime, while Keenan Allen has seen a little bit of a dip in his yards per route run each of the last 3 seasons. I think that all of that together adds up to Mike Williams having a higher weekly ceiling week in, week out, making him, a better DFS play aside from, occasions where we know that Keenan Allen's going to have a really juicy slot matchup. And then, this week he's cheaper. So of course we're going to end up with more Mike Williams.
And we have strength on strength, where you have the Chargers, one of the best offensive lines in the sport, against one of the best edge rushing duos in the sport. Chandler Jones on one side, Max Crosby on the other. That's going to be devastating. We're going to I can, spoiler alert, there are going to be future shows where we're going to talk about how, you not so fast, going in heavy on an outside wide receiver facing the Raiders because their quarterback's just not going to have enough time to throw, right? We're going to have these conversations, but fortunately not this week, right? Rashawn Slater and right, are going to make it so that Herbert's going to have plenty of time to throw to Mike Williams and wait for him to crack some daylight on the outside. It's all shaping up, man. It's all shaping up. You don't have to overthink this one. This is an easy one.
Those are my favorite. Those are my favorite ones. Here's one where the next game on our board is one side we probably don't have to overthink, and maybe you guys will correct me. The other side, I'm very anxious to hear what you guys have to say. Packers Vikings, we talked about all the uncertainty with target shares and such. The Packers have to be the most uncertain team in the entire NFL, especially with Allen Lazard, the guy who some people, not necessarily me, not necessarily you guys, but some people who had penciled in as the number one for the Packers without Devontae Adams. Now, what's going on? Christian Watson, I guess, is healthy. We don't know if Allen Lazard is. Robert Tonyan is back at practice. They have two running backs in a timeshare. And then you have, of course, on the Viking side, Justin Jefferson, one of the best young wide receivers, but also in a very tough, very, very one of the toughest matchups in the league. Dario, kick us off with Packers Vikings.
Eric, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Of course.
I actually have a curiosity. So we're talking about game stack. Let's say hypothetical game stack, right? You get Herbert, Mike Williams, Eckler, run it back with Waller, or you go Carr, Waller, and it may be a sort of a not full game stack, but just kind of a nice little mini stack. You get Carr, Waller, maybe Renfro, and then the easy Mike Williams run back, or if you want to do it, the game stack on that direction, Mike Williams and Austin Eckler on the run back. But my question for Dario is, how playable is Josh Palmer this week?
I think you probably want to wait until we've seen a little bit more from how they're going to use him and just how much, three wide receiver sets they're going to be in. Like, he's definitely going to be well behind Eckler in the target pecking order. So he's at best fourth. I think that, if you guys tuned into the show that Eckler and Justin Herbert did with Matt Harmon last week, like, they were both really hyping up Gerald Everett. So I think there's a good chance we see even Gerald Everett out targeting Josh Palmer this week. So I would probably be relatively hesitant to be plugging him into my lineups this week, just because I want to be a little bit more certain of what we're getting from him. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I was going to adding Everett into the mix of the game stack makes a lot more sense than Palmer.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what do you guys think if we're kind of getting a little gal-brained, maybe in larger field tournaments or something? Herbert, Mike Williams, Everett, and now you're filling that tight end position with that secondary and cheaper option.
Yeah.
And then something like that, we talked about McKinnon. We talked about catch up Mahomes. If the Chargers have a defensive line mismatch and they're winning, right? They're up by 14 in the second quarter. Now it's Amir Abdullah time in the backfield. It's not Josh Jacobs time anymore. And you have the punt running back catch. We're getting the James Conner production from the cheap guy in a scenario in which you just outlined every reason probably why the Chargers will be playing from in front. So Herbert's maybe doing the passing and scoring. You're getting the cheap tight end and a cheap running back. Now you can get your maybe the Justin Jeffersons
fully game stack that because you could actually because of Abdullah you can afford Adams at that point.
Yeah, right. And now maybe you're getting 7-8 catches from Abdullah and Devontae Adams is getting his 15 targets or whatever. So I think it's a pretty fun game.
Pretty good, Eric.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty fun game to approach that way. Maybe
there's a pretty clear line between Chiefs Cardinals and Raiders Chargers as like the two just like juiciest games on this slate by far. And then these last three we're going to talk about are kind of like still enticing in some ways. And we obviously don't know how every game is going to play out. It's the NFL. But I think as far as like shootout potential and the wide array of options that had like genuine appeal, these two games are kind of like, you know, just the juiciest piece of prime rib for week one.
Yeah. So into these last, I'm glad we spent as much time on those first two, because I do think they're both the most important. Yeah,
there are
they're the most
shows
important.
that just go through the games and they spend an equal amount of time. This is the one. My one request for RotoGrinders was, can we not talk about games that we actually don't care about, and can we just sink completely into these games that people should have maximum exposure to, should build their whole week around? Hell
you didn't
yeah.
want to spend the same amount of time on Panthers Browns
Hell
as
yeah.
as Chiefs.
What about
Chiefs,
Jaguars
Cardinals?
Commanders?
Yeah, exactly.
These games don't even deserve to be mentioned.
Right.
Don't even mention. It's as if they're not even there. I don't even know they're there.
So what's your favorite way to approach then Packers Vikings? Because I see the appeal as well, but also I think most would say, well, tell me, other than Justin Jefferson or maybe Dalvin Cook, who do I play in this game?
Right. I think you probably stack Cousins with Jefferson, maybe a little bit of Irv Smith or Thielen on the side if you want to make it a double stack. And then I'm actually looking to bring that back with Aaron Jones, because we know the pass catching splits for Aaron Jones in games without Devontae Adams are insane. And Aaron Jones is probably going to see 6, 7, 8 targets from Aaron Rodgers easily. If Allen Lazard misses this game, who knows? They could just have Jones and Dillon on the field every snap and practically use Jones as a slot receiver. So I think that I'm looking to bring back a Minnesota stack with probably Jones. You could do Dillon, but I think his pass catching upside is definitely more limited, although he has shown it. And then I think the Green Bay receivers are just an absolute minefield. Like none of us can pretend we know, especially if Lazard is out. I mean, like we've been penciling in Lazard as a hypothetical number one, and then like I'm doing the week one projections now, and it's just an absolute disaster with the Packers wide receivers.
This is why we're not that thrilled about this game.
Right. And
this
the thing
why
is,
you want to come in, you want to play your Cousins and Jefferson and check the box with your portfolio for this week. Please, by all means, do that and then move on.
Yeah. And then the Packers also, unlike the Chiefs, Cardinals, Chargers, Raiders, the Packers love to slow the game down when they're ahead. Like I can easily see this game. Just the Packers get up by 2 scores in the second quarter, and then they're just handing it to Dillon the entire second half. And
brutal. That
ends up just being one of the least exciting games for DFS.
Yeah, I'm not that into Dillon this week either for that. I just, it's Aaron Jones. You're hoping beyond hope that it's the other way. Because if it's the other way, then the Vikings are not going to slow down. If they have their boot on the throat of Aaron Rodgers, they're going to keep pressing the entire game. It's a brand new coaching staff. They believe in a fast-paced offense, and they're not going to relent. So when you think about the game scenarios, if you're looking up and the Packers have a 14-point lead, I mean, just rip your ticket up at that point. Like, forget it. Yeah. No one wins in that situation.
No
one with exposure to the game wins in that situation. We're all screwed. Forget it. So
did you guys happen to
you got to think about it, right? What is the game scenario where player X exceeds expectations? And the game scenario where AJ Dillon exceeds expectations is a game scenario we don't really want anyway. So that would be the reason. The reason why we actually prefer, by I think a wide margin in terms of building lineups this week, the Aaron Jones play is because then that necessarily will almost dictates the game flow, and the game script is what we want. We want to see it sped up. We want to force Rodgers. He's still going to slow the game down, though. Last in the league in pace of play last year, even with Devontae Adams. This is what drives me crazy. He milks it all the way down to a 0.5 seconds every single snap. He's not going to change his ways. This is how he's wired. He has no receivers now. I mean, we don't need to go this, but I mean, Josiah DeGora isn't the worst punt play tight end. I mean, if we're looking at just straight up target share distribution, DeGora is interesting because Tunyon's very unlikely to play. He's 2.9K on DraftKings. I'm not saying it's like, oh, this is a guy I'm playing a lot of. No, but that might be a sprinkle, because what are you going to do? How are you going to what? Right? That's not the worst run back ever. It's one of the worst, but it's not the worst. And this is see the place we're at already. We're already at a crappy place.
I think that means Dario. I think that means we need to put a bow on this one once we get to the Josiah DeGuara portion of the show. But
I did want to throw.
We would be remiss. What about if Lazard doesn't play? Dobbs, Sammy Watkins, any of that. The people will fly. I will say this: people
they're
will
going to
play Romeo
Dobbs. Week 1 Sammy. We want week 1 Sammy.
Yes,
week
people
1
will
Sammy
play
year in, year out.
Also, he's 4,700 on DraftKings. That's wild to me. People are going to play 4,700 Sammy Watkins in the game.
That's too expensive.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And the Aaron Rodgers
3,700, I'd be thinking about it. I'd be like, well.
Yeah. And I still wouldn't do it, but I would at least think about it. 4,700 is absolutely wild. I mean, MVS is 4,700, and we already talked about that. But the Rodgers thing, I just have to hit on this one more time. There's a few things I was excited to do this show.
So
because
overrated.
You guys are
for fantasy. It makes me nuts.
You guys are so into a lot of the same things that I like to do, but it's not just because I think they're important to football, which they are, but it's that they're not considered enough in the DFS space. Offensive line, defensive line play, corner, like secondary play. People will do the cornerback, wide receiver matchups, and I understand all of that, but just generally understanding how football works from the trenches and the secondaries. And the Rodgers thing is one of my favorite ones that people don't consider. They're just like, Packers have good matchup, insert Rodgers or whatever. And I constantly go back to, I can't even watch Packers games anymore because, like you said, he's watching the clock. You see him, he keeps looking up at the clock and it's rolling. I'm like,
it's so disgusting from a DFS standpoint.
They'll have wins with like 7 total offensive drives. It's just like, oh yeah, we're just milking the clock. Here we go.
Their offensive line is great. Their defense is good. This is all the things we hate.
Yep.
So they play slow. They don't have playmakers on the outside. What are we doing? I mean, there's a theoretical game stack of like Jefferson and Osborne with Cousins running it back with Jones and DeGora. That would be our theoretical pukey game stack.
Yeah.
And I will say
on that note, Dario, wrap us up.
Yeah. I think that you want to probably lean more towards Jones on DraftKings, right? We got the full PPR, and on FanDuel, Dylan is slightly more appealing as just like a one-off running back play in the way that if this game does play out how we expect, and the Packers are playing from ahead, you plug in Dylan into one of your RB slots on FanDuel, and he ends up with 2 touchdowns. Like you're in the money. So
we don't talk about that enough either. When a guy is better as a standalone play versus stack.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sometimes a guy is actually kind of toxic for a stack, but great as a standalone.
Yep.
Right. That's Dylan this week.
It's to the
probably Dylan most weeks this season.
Yeah. He's the guy that when the game gets mucked up in terms of a game stack perspective, he might be the guy who benefits, right? He does grind out his 18 carries. He gets the goal line carry. It's like you mentioned Connor before, right? And we've obviously touched on the McKinnons and Abdullahs of the world. They benefit from the chaos of a shootout because you're getting a bunch of checkdowns, maybe some big plays, etc. Dylan benefits from this is about to be 17-6 and we're about to, and he's going to have the two. He's going to have the 2 touchdowns. Jamino says he's not just a bowling. I do think Dylan, I will say from a long-term seasonal perspective, Dylan really showed a lot as a pass catcher last year. So there will be times where we may discuss him. I just don't think this is necessarily the spot.
We'll see, guys. That's the thing. We talked about it at the very beginning of the show. We're going to see how the touch distribution shakes out and the target distribution between the running backs shakes out. What we know is it's very the conditions are favorable for Aaron Jones in week 1. Let's just go with that, and then we'll recalibrate.
Yeah, so excited to overreact to week 1. How about you guys?
I know. Yeah, next week's going to be even more fun than
we'll
this.
Have data. At least we'll have some data.
That is true. 2 teams next up on our list here that I'm very interested in kind of some data on. Eagles Lions, our Lions. Some would call it our Lions. After being on Hard Knocks with Dan Campbell, tons of fun offensive weapons on the Lions. They also have a little bit of offensive line concerns. I don't know if you saw the latest injury reporting today. Eagles, I feel like the Eagles are, if anyone besides Jalen Hurts was playing quarterback, everyone would just be so excited. But people have it in their minds, maybe some negative sentiment, or maybe even if Minshew was in there, people would be very excited for the Eagles. But all the Eagles look appealing to me, and honestly, a bunch of Lions look appealing to me if we want to start stacking up this game. Dario, what do you think about Eagles Lions?
Yeah, I think all the Eagles pass catchers are absolutely in play. The Eagles running backs, I'm probably staying away from Miles Sanders. Kenny Gainwell is someone we love and could definitely see a few targets. Miles Sanders said he's fully healthy, so I think that we're probably going to get a pretty ugly split. That's one of those backfields that you can almost like pencil in a rule for yourself. Oh, hey, like stay away from Eagles running backs, and you'd be winning with that about 95% of the time. But I think that stacking Hurts with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, any of those three, you can bring it back with DeAndre Swift in garbage time is an absolute cheat code. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Lions have just been so open with talking about how they want to continue feeding him like they did down the stretch last season. And I mean, he's probably not going to get 10 targets every game like we saw, but I'd be surprised if he gets less than 7. So I think that there's a couple of good bring back options. That Eagles stack is going to be really juicy. And I think that both of these teams, are big question marks in terms of how their offensive philosophies will play out, how fast are they going to run, and how pass heavy will they be? Like, that's a big question with the Eagles this year. So it's a bit dicier. Like we said, this game, not nearly up there with the two big ones on the slate, but it does have a slightly higher over under than the Packers Vikings game. So there's certainly some appeal there with a lot of those options.
I'm worried a little bit here, guys, fellas. I'm worried. I know that we are into the Lions, Hard Knocks. They look great. Goff is essentially an MVP candidate at this point. But this Eagles team is a Super Bowl contender.
Mm-hmm.
This Eagles team is completely stacked. They got CGJ, they got Darius Slay, and then, oh, by the way, James Bradbury to go along with these like sideline to sideline monsters like Hassan Reddick and backups are like Derek Barnett, guys that were starters on other teams. They're drafting Jordan Davis, who doesn't even have a comp. Like, there's no one left on 350 pounds, athletic, can dunk basketballs. What are we talking about? It's just nuts. Their defense is nuts. Their offense just got A.J. Brown and an ascending Jalen Hurts. Everyone's healthy. I mean, think about the news from the Eagles camp has just been all about, like, who's getting the running back reps and how healthy is Miles Sanders and why is Nick Sirianni wearing a Kenneth Gainwell t-shirt. But think about the news you haven't heard. Think about the rumors you haven't heard. Think about the stuff you haven't heard. It's been pretty much quiet, like a little bit of Lane Johnson injury news. Like, that's about it. It's not a big deal, right? This team is primed, and the Lions are not quite ready yet. The Lions are exciting, but this isn't the game. When we're talking about the Lions exceeding expectations, like beating their Vegas regular season wins over under, right? Going over 6.5 and then 7, however high it gets, right? Fine. But none of that is predicated on them winning week 1. They're not. Okay. And good luck to the Cowboys this year, by the way, in the NFC East against this Eagles team. So the worry is that they just start hot and they just take the air out of the football in the second half. And yes, there's going to be, the Lions are going to try to make a game of it probably. But my fear is that how this game is going to work out is going to be a little lower scoring than we would have ideally liked to see. And that we're not allowed to be surprised when, like, the Lions can never really get any drives going because this Eagles defense is one of the best in the league.
I couldn't possibly agree more. The Eagles are one of my favorite teams, just generally from a bullishness of the entire season. The talent, like you said, if
unit by unit, Eric, just go unit by unit.
if Jalen Hurts was not the quarterback, they would be people's like sleeper Super Bowl pick. But he just has that thing about him that people don't like him, and that's fine. I'm not saying I'm right about him or whatever. But if you
He's
put
a national
Heisman,
championship quarterback,
and a Heisman
what are we talking about?
Heisman winning wide receiver who was basically like everybody talks about Cooper Kupp, you know, and what he did last year. Devonta Smith was like that on steroids in the SEC, you know, as a wide receiver. AJ Brown, one of the best wide receivers in the league. Dallas Goedert, probably the best offensive line in the league, top 3 for sure, something like that.
Sure.
I mean, it's just and even Devonta Smith, the one guy on this team that I haven't been drafting has been Devonta Smith in seasonal leagues, because I never win. You know, how am I going to know when to start him? But in best ball and in I don't know, DFS tournaments, there's a utility for a lot of players, right? Again, if I have to set a lineup and it's high stakes, I ain't drafting Devonta Smith. Sorry, but yes, there's going to be spike weeks, and yeah, he's going to be a guy you're going to want to play in DFS week in, week out. Absolutely.
One final thing on this game, and then we'll hit our final game, which would probably be a little bit quicker because I think this one also might be a little one-sided, similar to this.
I also think you can play Goddard as a standalone.
I think so too. I think
Goddard's a great standalone play this week. I think Goddard's going to be a monster.
Yeah, I don't think you have to have a run back from the Lions side. Although Dario hit the Swift thing. Like Swift might catch 10 balls if they're down by 21 in the second half. Definitely no arguments for me. My only thing that I would say is I'm gonna play some Miles Sanders, and I totally agree with your overall sentiment to the running back room. I have no idea how it's gonna play out this year. Miles Sanders might get 8 carries on Sunday, and it's Boston Scott's out there and Gainwell and whatever. But everything that we just outlined as to why the Eagles might just boat race this team and are gonna be out in front is like Miles Sanders still has averaged 5 yards a carry for his career, and he's behind the best offensive line ever. If he had scored 4 touchdowns last year instead of 0, we wouldn't be talking about him quite the same way as
Rodrigo looks great, right? Rodrigo looks good. Could we just take a step back for a second? Rodrigo is like a 6th round rookie linebacker. Okay. If Miles Sanders can't have success against that guy this year, then I mean, it's over.
Yeah, well, I'll know. I'm gonna play some Miles Sanders. He's gonna get 8 carries for 42 yards. I'm not gonna win anything. And next week we'll be like, you're an idiot for playing Miles Sanders. But I think this is the time I want to do it because, like we said, we don't know anything, and we're all talking about how they should just dominate this team. Well, if they're going to be up by 20 points in the second half and Miles Sanders is going to get all these carries, like just let me get that touchdown and the 100-yard bonus at 5K or whatever he is and move on.
I think this is a good game to skinny stack. You could play Swift, right? You can always play Swift and Goddard, something like that. Nice little skinny stack, right? One player per team, cool. Like we're good, right?
Yeah.
You start adding and layering exposure to this game, and then all of a sudden if you do that, then suddenly you have quite a bit of shark against what Bradbury and Slay. It's just this is probably not a shark week.
Yeah. Yes, correct.
Right, but it could be. I mean, it's possible. Right, he's that good. Like he can go up and get it. But you know, it's not for me this week with DJ Shark. That's okay. That's okay. We'll get him next week. Like we're gonna play Lions, guys. We're gonna get really excited about the Lions. There's gonna be plenty of Lion shootouts ready to go because their offense is better than their defense. Right. That's why we love the Vikings. Right. Why do you love the Vikings in DFS? Oh, well, because their offense is better. Sometimes it doesn't have to be that hard. The Vikings and the Lions both have that. And it's really the opposite of the Packers, right? So it's the inverse of the Packers. We're going to be playing a bunch of Lions this year. It's just maybe this game, maybe just go light.
Like Definitely. It. Another game. I'm curious what Dario will start with you on a somewhat similar game. The Ravens and the Jets. The Jets have a bunch of it feels very similar to me, honestly.
Yeah.
The Jets have a bunch of kind of fun, young offensive players. Now they have Joe Flacco, and maybe Flacco and Goff are really not that dissimilar, but a bunch of kind of fun offensive weapons. The Ravens are the team who looks healthy, you know, outside of their running backs, looks healthy. You have Rashad Bateman, who looks very fun in his second year. Mark Andrews, who was absolutely dominant. Lamar Jackson is healthy. I'm struggling to see how the Ravens don't do kind of what we just talked about with the Eagles, but how are you viewing Ravens Jets?
Yeah, the Ravens are favored by a full touchdown -7, whereas the Eagles are favored -4. So like this is, you know, in everyone's eyes, an even bigger, more lopsided matchup. But I think this one is, you know, potentially really great for DFS because you get like such a narrow concentration of targets from the Ravens side. Like Lamar Jackson's going to feed Mark Andrews. He's going to feed Rashad Bateman. And then the rest of those guys could easily combine for over 50% of the targets. So I think that you probably want to have at least a few lineups where you're stacking Lamar with one or both of those guys, bringing it back with definitely Elijah Moore would be my favorite on the Jets side. I think Garrett Wilson is still kind of working his way up the pecking order, but I think I definitely
the theme
want to
of
have
this week is we're playing almost no rookies.
Yeah.
What
sure.
would be the one rookie? What would be is it Chris Olave, the one rookie that we're excited about this week?
Even Olave,
Probably.
I think Michael Thomas is looking pretty healthy. Like, I think you might even want to wait to see on Olave, but I think he's the receiver. I think London is probably one you're more comfortable with rolling into your lineup than Olave.
Just in a brutal spot for London, and he hasn't been healthy. So kind of to Matt's question, it's tough.
I don't know.
It's tough.
I mean, Michael Thomas it's all going to hinge on Michael Thomas. I mean, he practices and then his body doesn't respond well either the next day. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. If no Thomas, I think Olave might be my favorite rookie to play this week, other than it's tough, man.
Yeah.
It's tough. Week 1 rookie's tough. It's never easy.
Dario, did you touch on the Ravens side? If you had to pick Bateman or Andrews? Because I think this is similar. I don't think we want to play Lamar with both of them, but do you have a preference between the two?
I think Bateman is a better value. Andrews is definitely a higher floor. I think you probably want to have a fairly even mix of both. Like, I'm probably slightly leaning Andrews just because that elite tight end does potentially give you, you know, that runway to just absolutely separate from the field if Andrews has that nuclear week. And Eric, you did touch on like the health of the Ravens running back room is one of the biggest weaknesses probably across all 32 teams. So I think that might be a reason that we still see the Ravens airing it out slightly more earlier in the season than later as their running backs get healthy. So the weeks to stack Lamar might be these early weeks. But yeah, I think I'm leaning slightly toward Andrews.
I think so too. Pretty into Lamar. I don't really have a super strong preference between Bateman and Andrews. I personally will limit it to only those two guys. It's week 1. I got a lot of different guys I want to play. A lot of people I think are favorable prices. I don't need to dip into, and I really like Isaiah Likely, but I don't need to dip into that probably as of yet, or, you know, the Devin Duvernays of the world. But what Dario said is one of my bigger takeaways also for this week. Kind of like we talked about with the Cardinals at the top, the Ravens on the flip side, having no running backs. I just don't foresee a situation in which they're running Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake and these guys into the ground. And so to me, that just means Lamar Jackson. And so even though I think they probably just destroyed this Jets team, the Jets also have some very serious offensive line issues going on right now. I still just think it all just flows through Lamar. What do you think, Matt?
I mean, just to remind everybody, this is the least expensive you're going to see Rashad Bateman in DFS for the next 5 years at least. So, I mean, if you want to get him at the cheapest you'll ever see him, play him. I don't know what else to tell you. Yeah, you play Rashad Bateman this week, baby. Lamar Rashad Bateman. Hell yeah. We're betting on a blowout. And sometimes blowouts are great for DFS, right? And if we get a big time blowout, if the Ravens can go hang 40 points on the Jets, those 40 points have to come from someone. Most likely Lamar. And then there's going to be some serious garbage time where we're hoping for, you know, a 10 catch game from Elijah Moore with garbage time.
And would you guys agree with me?
It's not the craziest thing to play a little bit, if you are going to stack this game, to play a little bit of Corey Davis. He is going against Marcus Peters. That's a better matchup than Marlon Humphrey on the other side. So I'd rather go up against Marcus Peters on the outside. And Joe Flacco has been known to throw it to the perimeter. He's not one of these modern day quarterbacks that comes from, you know, spread attack and I have to see throws before I make them. No, he's gonna throw up jump balls. He's gonna put it to Corey Davis and on a back shoulder throw. So I think that Flacco's a better fit for Corey Davis. I think that There's a better cornerback matchup here for Corey Davis. They're going to be in garbage time mode. Corey Davis isn't totally washed yet. He's still in his mid-20s. No. It's not over. It's just one of those weeks where if there was ever a week to play Corey Davis, it's probably this week, and then the clock starts, and you're probably never going to be able to play him again. Like there's a couple guys from Sammy Watkins to Corey Davis where this would be the week if there ever was a week, and if not this week, forget about it.
The anti-Rashad Bateman, if you will. You're like, play Bateman now because he's only going to get so much better. Play Corey Davis now because this is it. You got one shot. You got one shot for it. We're never going to want to. We're not even going to talk about Corey Davis on this show for the rest of the year.
Those are the guys whose lunches are going to get eaten by the rookies over the course of the season, right? Like just target share wise and everything. Like Garrett Wilson is going to go directly into eating up Corey Davis's targets. But would you guys agree with me that Joe Flacco raises the ceiling on all the Jets pass catchers over Zach Wilson?
It does. Yes, he does. Yes. Listen, all the beat report. I mean, to a man, right? 100 out of 100. They don't have. I mean, do they have 100? They probably have 100 beat reporters. It's crazy. The Jets. Insist that Flacco was just simply better stacking good practices than Zach Wilson. Period. That and the players preferred balls from Flacco. I hate saying it. It's not like it's an inconvenient truth, but
it's tough. The truth hurts sometimes, and it is what it is. The Jets, it's a sunk cost. We move on. Now it's Joe Flacco time, and not Zach Wilson. That covers our main games. I'm really glad we spent kind of the amount of time that we did on each one. The last few were kind of a little bit more straightforward, and the first couple were the most exciting, but also very much so the most nuanced. And next week, everything we said about particularly those first two games might be totally wrong, as we talked about at the top. And that's the fun. That's the fun of week one. Before we get out of here, any kind of final thoughts, anything that has changed over the course of this conversation? Dario, what's kind of your overarching week one thought?
I think that one note that I wanted to get back to earlier when we were talking about Chiefs Cardinals that I didn't get to is how much the line has moved towards the favor of the Chiefs. Like we saw this one at -3 for basically since the schedule was announced up until like the last 2, 3, 4 days. Now the Chiefs are favored by 6. Like their implied total has gone from like already the highest to up another 1.5. So like the ceiling on the Chiefs really should not be understated. Like that line movement is just a strong indication that there's a good chance the Chiefs are going to just put up an absolutely crazy number of points on the Cardinals. And I think that that's our favorite game of the week for good reason.
Love it, Matt.
One of my big lessons learned over the years was to pay up at quarterback. Pay up at quarterback and not spend so much time in the discount bin, right? You can tell yourself this story about how Trey Lance breaks the slate because he's Trey Lance, right? And we've been drafting him in so many underdog drafts all off season. That's like, oh my God, I got to play Trey Lance. He's only 6K on DraftKings, yada, 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 yada. And I've trapped myself into, value quarterbacks for years, right? I think we all go through this phase, right? And now you look at the quarterbacks we're telling you to play this week. It's Mahomes, Herbert, Jackson, Murray, Hurts. It's all the most expensive quarterbacks. And we're not sorry. Like that is money well spent in order to get exposure to the right games and the right weaponry.
Definitely. Couldn't possibly agree more. The game has also changed a little bit. We might get to week 12 or something and the pricing is really tight. We want to jam CMC or, Devontae, Jefferson, etc. And we want to consider maybe the Justin Fields of the world, the Mac Jones of the world, somebody who's down there. But right now, that's not the case. You talked about Rashad Bateman being really cheap. We've mentioned some cheap tight ends. We brought up Elijah Moore, who's 5K. All the Chiefs wide receivers are super cheap. We're not lacking for value options. And so I totally agree. Just go get your guys with the 40+ point ceiling at quarterback this week. And then we talked about it, just reiterating at the very top is embrace this uncertainty. Why am I into MVS this week? if everybody just thinks MVS is Green Bay MVS and it's in the game of the week that we love, and maybe he can eke out some more upside. Matt mentioned at the top, it's not quite Sky Moore time. Well, if he's only competing with McCole Hardman and maybe the ghost of Juju Smith-Schuster, why can't he be the guy that gets the 10 targets? I'm not expecting it, but those are the kind of things I'm thinking through. Right.
You're going to look up, and the Millie Maker winner is going to have multiple gross players. I guarantee it.
Yep.
It's going to be at least 2 gross. There's going to be an MVS. There's going to be a Corey Davis in there. I'm telling you.
And so that's how we're going to win this week. The gross plays. But we will be back every single week.
I don't know if we can wait.
Yes, exactly. You're right. Don't tell my wife that. We'll be back every single week. I don't think we have an exact time figured out yet. This is a chaotic week as we're all heading into the season. Matt's out doing drafts. I'm drafting way too many stupid best ball teams, but we'll be back every single week breaking down in a very similar fashion. We'll get into a little bit more optimizer work and all sorts of fun stuff that Matt and Dario have over at Roto Underworld. But for myself, Dario, and Matt, we will see you guys next week.